trying to tell us we have a bad heart. It's nice to know we have a good heart. But the thing that will save us is knowing God's heart. Right? Because like you said, the head will tell the heart, so what if you have a good heart? Where's your good heart got you now? See, that's what the head will tell you.
It tells me that quite frequently. I can just
right.
Stop.
And that's why it's important to see God's heart. Right? Because when you see God's heart for what it is, the head can't say nothing about that. Right? The head tried to tell Jesus some things. Right? But Jesus was in the bosom of the Father. You know, like in the Gospel of John, the Gospel of John describes John as the disciple whom Jesus loved. You know, it doesn't describe any of the other disciples that way. You know who wrote John's Gospel? John. He describes himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. He doesn't describe the other people that. But if you notice in the accounts, John, when they're eating the Last Supper, John is in the bosom of Jesus. He's leaning on the bosom of Jesus. He's so close to Jesus that Peter, when he wants to ask Jesus, who's going to betray you, he tells John to ask.
Yeah.
Right? John was one of the only ones at the cross when the thing went down. John's gospel is all about God coming in the flesh to reveal his heart to the world, so that they would have a knowledge of him or know him and not perish from off of the land.
Right.
And so John's whole gospel is about man having a perverted view of God and God's heart. And because they had a perverted view of who God was and God's thoughts and intentions towards them, they were perishing from off the land. So John talks about God being made flesh, so that we could behold him for who he actually is. And we could find ourselves seeing, this guy loves me. He really loves me. His heart has only ever been filled with loving kindness towards me. His heart has only ever been to be good to me. He can only ever heal me from what hurts me. He can never be the cause of what hurts me. He can only ever give me a certainty of blessing and life. He can never be the cause of cursing and death. He's not the author of sin and death. He's not the thief. He's the giver of life. You see, Jesus comes in the Gospel of John and he manifests God in the flesh. That's why it says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was what? And the Word was God, it says. And the Word what? The Word was made flesh. And you could say, and God was made flesh. And we beheld him. Right? Because we lacked knowledge about God. We didn't know God. And we didn't know his style. Right? We were busy being intimate with our own works, and when our own works served us with cursing and death, we thought God was the one cursing us and giving us death.
Exactly.
Our counsel about God became darkened, just like Job's counsel was darkened about God, and we began saying things when we found ourselves perishing, well, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. That's the place we found ourselves in.
Right.
We're intimate with our works. Our works can't give life, they give death. And then when they give us death, we think it's God giving us death because of our sin. And then that blinded us to the heart of God. We blamed God for the death and the cursing we were experiencing. We didn't understand it was iniquity in the serpent system that was killing us. We thought God was the thief. And what happened was it painted an image of God in his heart for us that was darkened by sin and death. It darkened our counsel.
Right.
Wonderful Counselor became flesh. And what does he counsel us into? The heart of God. He counsels us into the real heart of God. And John, the whole Gospel of John is about that. On the day they threw the woman caught in adultery in front of Jesus, that's the day it's the last day of the great feast. The Jewish people were celebrating the Torah as God with them. That very day, they were celebrating God with them through the Torah, the written scriptures. But through all their knowledge of the written scriptures, through all their intimacy with the carnal ordinances and the works of the law, they didn't know God. And so on the day they were celebrating God with them through the Torah, Jesus is God with them in the flesh. And then they throw the woman caught in adultery in front of Jesus. And what do they think that God commands? For her to be killed. God's the thief that steals, kills, and destroys sinners. That's their knowledge of God.
Right.
But Jesus is God standing there. And what does he say? I don't condemn you.
Right.
And not only does he not condemn her, he justifies her. He stands as her advocate. He stands there as her friend. And he defends her. He defends her. He removes the condemnation. He removes the accuser. God with them.
Right.
You see? They didn't know God. When Hosea talks about my people are destroyed, my people perish for a lack of knowledge, he's talking about the Israelites. The Israelites had a view of God that was, God will kill us and serve us with death because of sin. And that's what they implemented. And they didn't know God. They didn't see it was their works that was killing them. They were trying to know God through their works. They didn't see that the law Moses gave them was all about pointing to the work of God. They didn't see that it was telling a story about God's love for them, that God was filled with only loving kindness, that He only ever wanted to be good to them, and that this is what God did. The Israelites did not try to have intimacy with God through the work that God did to lead them out of Egypt and lead them into the promised land. They tried to have intimacy with God through the works of the law. They tried to have intimacy with God through rituals. And so they weren't intimate with God, they were intimate with their works. And then when their works killed them, they blamed God. And so they interpreted the scriptures as God being the thief that steals, kills, and destroys. John speaks of God becoming flesh to reveal that He's not the thief, He's the Good Samaritan. Right?
Your thoughts are